Hey everyone, Pugs here with 2 new reviews for y'all. Today, I'm covering Patrick's Coupon and Out of the Picture. The classic pairing of an episode no one talks about with one that everyone talks about. A tale as old as this show. I always feel bad for the relatively unknown episodes a part of that formula. Like, damn, they get so overshadowed. I can't promise that I won't do the exact same thing to Patrick's Coupon, but it at least has the benefit of being the episode that comes first in the pair, so the overshadowing might not be as bad as it would be otherwise. And before I get into that, let me just take a quick second to say, as always, thank you all for watching the video today, whoever and whenever you are. Every last view, comment, like, and subscription is appreciated by me. And now, let's just get right into it. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I've almost missed having Patrick-focused episodes. Almost. Yes, it's no secret that I find Patrick-focused episodes to routinely be the weakest in the show, largely because of Patrick himself. For anyone new here, let me just say for the record that this is not because I dislike Patrick. Not at all. But I've found that he works best when he has other characters to bounce off of, which of course can still happen in episodes centering around him, but that doesn't always happen. And also, episodes centered on him have had a tendency to feature him at his worst. Cough cough, Pet Sitter Pat, or Yours, Mine, and Mine, or The Card, or... anyway. Despite this being my opinion, I've definitely taken notice of the fact that until now, Season 10 didn't have any Patrick-focused episodes. Whirly Brains came the closest, but not quite, and so I'm a bit relieved to see Patrick's Coupon here, as even if I don't love Patrick-focused episodes, they are still important. They're important diversifying elements of the show. Patrick's Coupon begins with Patrick dealing with a sea urchin in a sequence that is more entertaining than the entirety of Rise and Shine. Ha, I know. Low blow. But listen, if I'm going to be talking about a Patrick-centric episode, then 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be giving that episode some lashings. It's not even that bad, like, I put it in mediocre, but let me have my fun at that episode's expense. Anyway, this fight with the sea urchin leads to Patrick finding a lost coupon for free ice cream. Can I find a coupon for free ice cream? I'd love that, especially with how fucking hot it's been. The episode then proceeds to fully assuage my concerns, for now, related to this being a Patrick-focused episode, as Patrick declares that he's going to use the coupon to buy an ice cream not for himself, but for his best friend. And yes, he does forget SpongeBob's name here, but for once I didn't hate this joke, so I'm definitely declaring this as a win. Also, that picture of him and SpongeBob is literally so adorable. But anyway, yes, finally, we've got Patrick acting like a good friend with no prompting needed. This is a huge win, and I want to see more of this. And the subsequent joke with Patrick knocking SpongeBob's ice cream out of his hand so that Patrick can get SpongeBob an ice cream is funny as hell. See, now this is how you do jerk-ass Patrick. I better see notes being taken right now. Moving right along, Patrick sets out to get SpongeBob an ice cream, and he's confronted by some entertaining obstacles, like Mr. Krabs, who has a sense for when free things are in his vicinity, and so he wants to steal Patrick's coupon. Which he almost does until Squidward intervenes, which, let me tell you, that surprised me. I love how Squidward actually chastises Mr. Krabs here for trying to swindle Patrick out of the coupon. And so after this, Patrick gets extremely paranoid over people stealing his coupon, comedically so. I just adore how dramatic Patrick is here. Y'all know I love my melodrama. After a funny, let's call it sequence of shenanigans, Patrick eventually makes his way to the ice cream shop. And let me just tell you now, this is an ice cream shop that I'd want to go to. It just looks divine. And I know that this is a really low bar, but I love that Patrick doesn't forget that he was getting an ice cream for SpongeBob specifically. I know, very low bar, but listen, you already know that if this episode took place in, say, seasons 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe even 9, that would have been the plot, or the ending stinger at least. And yes, I know Patrick starts getting very tempted to eat the ice cream himself, but SpongeBob is not easily forgotten here, and that's what I'm looking for. Unfortunately for Patrick, though, his coupon is woefully out of date, and so the store snatches the ice cream away from him. This leads Patrick to snap in a way that I don't think I've seen since Valentine's Day, and I love it. Especially with the expressive animation, it just looks so good. Although, I do wish it didn't just end with him having a crying fit. I want to see him destroy shit like this really is Valentine's Day. But I'll take what I can get. Bill Fagerbakke is just so good in this one. And the way the worker keeps roasting Patrick is hilarious. And the episode then surprises me when the worker tells Patrick that there's someone who might be able to honor the coupon, the Ice Cream King. At this point, I was worried that the episode might start to bore me, but then it came out with this, so that was a good move on its part, because this sounds interesting. Sounds being the operative word here, because, well, It turns out this was not as interesting as I'd anticipated. Patrick meets the king, who turns out to be another starfish like him, who also acts exactly like him. Great. Watching two characters be this obtuse together rarely works for me, and this is no exception. It feels like all of the momentum that this episode had been building just grinds to a halt here, because this scene takes far too long and lacks anything for me to laugh at. And the King's challenge isn't all that fun either. But thankfully, Patrick wins himself a free ice cream cone for SpongeBob, and when he makes it back to the pineapple, the ice cream is melted. Damn. But Patrick also got Mr. Krabs' severed arm for SpongeBob instead. Well, a hearty handshake, which of course refers to Mr. Krabs' attempt at swindling Patrick, but I also wonder if this is a reference to Valentine's Day. And it turns out that that SpongeBob got a whole boatload of ice cream for him and Patrick to share, which is a pretty wholesome way to end the episode. Patrick's coupon, it started so damn good. More than started, it was good, being a really enjoyable episode for its first, 8 minutes, until we get to the Ice Cream King, which is when the episode starts to fall apart, derailing like a catastrophic train failure. This part of the episode is so boring and feels so out of step with the rest of the episode, and the episode doesn't really recover. Sure, the ending is good, but I'm still feeling thrown off by the time it's over. I can't stand when episodes shoot themselves in the foot like this, especially one that had been going great for so long like this episode was. It's so disappointing. And so I have no choice but to put this episode in the lowest tier, where I can still say that I like the episode, meaning it's in the good tier, where it comes in with a score of 7.2 out of 10. Right out the gate, I already know that Out of the Picture is quite the divisive episode, to say the least. Or at least it was at one point. I think this episode had the disadvantage of premiering at a time when people took the Squidward torture porn criticism more seriously, and that, plus the similarities to One Course Meal here, made this episode have to fight tooth and nail to be given a fair chance. And it took a bit of time for people to come around to it, but I'd say these days opinions on this episode are more neutral or perhaps even positive, which I'm thankful for because, as per usual, when it comes to some of these notorious episodes, I actually always liked this one. Alright, let's get down to business. Not to defeat the Huns, though. It's been a minute since we've tapped into Squidward's artistic side, so I'm happy that this episode is all about that. I also like that Out of the Picture begins with Squidward holding an art show at the Krusty Krab. Even though Mr. Krabs is a cheap ass, I think that it's wholesome that he still allowed Squidward to do this in any capacity. And it's more wholesome that SpongeBob was the one behind Mr. Krabs doing this. As for the comedic value of this scene, it's pretty funny. There's all sorts of great visual gags when Squidward's trying to get people to buy his art. I love how in the end it's like something smells, but with eyes instead of noses, as people's eyes burn from Squidward's apparently horrible art. SpongeBob's support of Squidward in this scene continues to be wholesome and cute. Also, I just really like the look of this scene, from the vibrancy of Squidward's paintings to the storyboarding, which in this episode was done by Fred Osmond, so hats off to him because this looks great. SpongeBob tries to convince Mr. Krabs to buy one of Squidward's paintings because they're friends and he should be nice. Well, I'm definitely taking that win of almost explicit confirmation that Mr. Krabs and Squidward are indeed friends. But of course, being nice is not going to convince Mr. Krabs to buy a painting, no matter how cheap it is. What does convince him, though, is money, or rather, the possibility of making it. SpongeBob's pretty smart here to change up his angle for persuading Mr. Krabs to buy the paintings, just saying. Anyway, with the thought that Squidward's paintings may appreciate, or increase, in value, Mr. Krabs buys all of Squidward's paintings, and Squidward's joy upon selling these paintings is really sweet. So much wholesomeness in this episode, which is a perfect contrast for the less than wholesome business that'll be going down in a second. Squidward's joy turns into ego, which leads to him getting hilariously beat up by a customer. Moving on, a self-important art appraiser comes through to the Krusty Krab and says that Squidward's paintings ain't worth a damn. Unless Squidward dies, that is. The appraiser's gesture for death here is hilariously macabre, given how it's either referring to suicide by hanging or execution by hanging. Or both. And that just made me think of a third thing that is far less amusing, so I'm going to keep that thought to myself. Anyway, this is where the episode becomes controversial, because Mr. Krabs immediately decides he needs to get Squidward out of the picture so that he can make money on Squidward's paintings. So yes, Mr. Krabs is explicitly trying to kill Squidward in this episode, which on paper sounds bad, but in practice is fucking hilarious. Mr. Krabs sends Squidward on a variety of ridiculous, dangerous deliveries in hopes of having him killed. And I love all the environments we see Squidward dropped into here. This part of the episode is a really great example of the sheer vibrancy of the post-sequel era of the show when it comes to backgrounds and environmental design. Also, we see the return of Rock Bottom here, which is awesome. I love that SpongeBob has apparently befriended the people of Rock Bottom now. A fitting little plot thread following Rock Bottom. The episode, that is. And these scenes are, at their worst, entertaining, and at their best, really fucking funny. So, in other words, this is all excellent. And despite the danger of these deliveries, Mr. Krabs' attempts at getting Squidward killed fail because he has plot armor in the form of one SpongeBob SquarePants. And so for his last delivery, Mr. Krabs decides to send Squidward to Mars, explicitly without SpongeBob this time, as SpongeBob is currently tied up, literally, and this seems like it works. At least until Squidward gets dropped back off by the aliens, traumatized, and in a pose we will certainly see again, but in one piece. It is at this point that Mr. Krabs decides it's high time he take heed of the old saying, if you want something done right, you've got to do it yourself. And so he attempts to personally ensure that Squidward is out of the picture. This part of the episode is chaotic and hilarious, and I love how SpongeBob kind of has to play both sides here. This actually reminds me a lot of how I wish One Course Meal was. In fact, SpongeBob here acts exactly like how I thought he'd act in that episode, until it was slightly ruined by him fully helping Mr. Krabs in the end. But anyway, eventually Squidward decides he needs to destroy his paintings to preserve his own life, and so he reluctantly does so, which, as it turns out, is praised as, or by the art appraiser as performance art. Once Mr. Krabs gets wind of this, well, looks like we're getting Squid on strike too, because Squidward and Mr. Krabs destroy the whole Krusty Krab in the name of art and money. Of course, you can't put a price on performance art. Well, you can, but that wouldn't serve this episode's delicious irony. The ending of this episode is perfect too, with Squidward and Mr. Krabs getting crushed by a piece of debris, making them the art, and making them both winners and losers. Meanwhile, SpongeBob gets out of the situation completely unscathed. As he should. Just perfection. Yeah, Out of the Picture is easily one of the best episodes of this season so far. No doubt about that from me. It's absolutely hilarious from start to finish, and I have no problems with it at all. I also just like the plot a lot, and I like that it's about Mr. Krabs and Squidward, with SpongeBob playing a perfect supporting role. Now, I suppose I should mention how I feel about Mr. Krabs' treatment of Squidward in this episode. Well, I think it's completely in character. We already know that when money is on the line, Mr. Krabs will turn his back on any friendship or relationship of his. How much he turns his back is up to debate, but obviously in this episode he has no qualms about killing Squidward. But I think this is hilarious, so I don't have a problem with it. This show is a comedy. As long as it makes me laugh, I generally don't have a problem with any of the writing decisions. It's only when I don't laugh that I then have to start interrogating the writing, and I feel like this is something I've stood by in all of my reviews. But anyway, so this episode is definitely going in my amazing tier, where it comes in with a score of 9.5 out of 10. As always, I'll be ending this video with some closing thoughts of mine. I wanted to take a second to discuss the similarities between One Course Meal and Out of the Picture, because I'm certainly not the first to see that there is a connection here. And for me, I think that Out of the Picture feels like a much improved version of that old infamous episode. And I think there's two reasons why this episode is better. The first is that this episode is funny as fuck throughout its entire runtime. One Course Meal had its moments, but it wasn't consistently funny in this way, and it did not lean into the ridiculous cartoonishness as Out of the Picture. The second reason is that there is a difference between trying to kill someone and trying to drive them to suicide. The latter just feels more evil in a lot of ways, I'd say, and so I think that's why Mr. Krabs' actions are perceived much more poorly in that episode than him trying to kill Squidward in this episode, even if there are plenty of people who oppose Mr. Krabs in both instances. But yeah, Out of the Picture feels a lot like what One Course Meal could have been. However, there's no chance that One Course Meal would have ever been this way, because those seasons of SpongeBob, 5, 6, 7, 8, had a real knack for focusing on being realistic in certain ways, if that makes sense. Like, that's kind of where the awkward humor trend came from. There was a certain groundedness to these seasons that post-sequel SpongeBob has completely turned its back on. And so there was never going to be a version of One Course Meal that was as zany as Out of the Picture was. Well, anyway, I mean, I guess that's really all there is to say in regard to my closing thoughts anyway, so I'll go ahead and close things out here, and I'll see y'all in the next review, where we'll be wrapping up the episode reviews for Season 10.